Do you want to know how some of the development teams are delivering value faster to their stakeholders? Yes, they are using a framework called Scrum, a most popular agile framework which helps us in delivering value to the business at a faster pace. And in this program, you can learn about Scrum and you can also get a practical tips which you can directly apply in your software development process. We start with building up a fundamentals for understanding Scrum, and that starting section talks about knowing Scrum. We get into the details why it is a logical thing, why it's a common sense to use Scrum for your software development process. And once we know Scrum, we also take a dig deeper into Agile. We understand Agile values and principle, and we get into the details why Agile is becoming popular in today's software development environment. And before we start sprinting, before we start delivering, we also need to know how do we organize our team in a Scrum environment. So we have a section which talks about Scrum roles. So these three sections creates a foundation on which you can learn, you can start building up your Scrum knowledge. And how do we start? We start with sprint. Sprint sections tells us how in a Scrum we create a time boxed iteration, and at the end of this time box iteration we deliver business value. So this section tells us everything about a sprint, which is a time boxed iteration. Now once we have a sprint, we also need to know what are our requirements. What should we be working on in order to deliver value at a faster pace? We have a section on product backlog. Product backlog is a collection of requirement functionalities which business wants us to be working on. And we have a role called product owner, which we will know when we get into Scrum roles, who manages the product backlog. So we get into the product backlog, and then we have a requirement, we have a time boxed, and we have a Scrum roles. Now we need to start working. So we have a section on planning sprint. This section tells us how do we plan for our time boxed iteration. Then we have a section on executing and monitoring sprint, which gets into the details of day-to-day working. How do we organize our work inside the sprint, how the work get allocated to each and every developers during the sprint, and how do we monitor, how do we keep things transparent inside the sprint. This all gets covered in our section called executing and monitoring sprint. Once we are done with executing and monitoring, we need to finish the sprint. It's a time box iteration. It gets over when its time box is over. So we get into the final section for this area, which is about concluding sprint. We get into the topics that what do we do when we conclude our time box. With all these, you get a good fundamental understanding of Scrum. We also have one advanced topic. This advanced topic takes care of some of the advanced areas of Scrums like scaling Scrum. How do we take a Scrum process beyond one team? We also talk about some of the topics like, do we need a role who are not part of Scrum but somehow directly or indirectly influences the Scrum team? So those topics will get discussed in advanced topics. Once you go through all these content, you will get a good grip on some theories, some Scrum fundamentals, and practical way of implementing Scrum in your software development environment. And in case you are looking for some Scrum certification, this program also makes you ready for Scrum certificate. The complete program is based on Scrum Guide. Scrum Guide is a reference booklet for two popular Scrum certificate. One is called Certified Scrum Master and another is called Professional Scrum Master. So if you are looking for certification, again, this is the program for you, and we are providing enough practice questions to make you ready for your certification exam as well.